Sometimes the kindest gift hides inside a complaint. What you forget for someone can feed more than hunger. Sweetness grows when it's shared. This story is from a reader. Hi, I'm an actor. Hi, I'm the host. Listen to this. At the corner of a noisy road, an old woman sold oranges from a wooden cart. Sun and wind had cracked her hands, but her eyes stayed warm and quick. A young man passed her stall most evenings on his way home, a cloth bag on his shoulder, and a quiet smile he never explained. Each time he chose a few kilos of oranges, then he picked one from the bunch, peeled off a strip and tasted it and shook his head. Not sweet, he would say, light as a joke, placing that orange back on the cart. He paid her, thanked her, and walked away. After he left, the old woman would test the unsweet orange. She closed her eyes, startled every time. But it is sweet, she'd whisper and finish it with small, guilty pleasure before returning to work. This happened again and again, a little play only two people seemed to know. At home, the young man's wife watched him empty the bag onto their kitchen table. The oranges glowed like small suns. She peeled one, tasted it, and laughed. They're always sweet, she said. Why do you keep telling the seller they aren't? The young man rinsed his hands. She sells sweetness all day and never eats it herself. He answered simply. If I praise the orange, she won't keep even one. If I say it isn't sweet, she tastes it. I want her to enjoy the fruit of her own work. The next morning, the vegetable seller who shared the sidewalk with the old woman leaned over. Why do you give that fellow extra oranges? He complains every time, she said. The old woman smiled without stopping her hands. His complaint is not about the fruit, she said. It is his way of feeding me one orange. He thinks I don't see it, but I do. And when I see his love, the scale moves by itself. So the days went on, a quiet habit of care, but young man kept forgetting. One orange, the old woman kept tasting what she earned, but would never take. The neighbor kept watching, puzzled and then softened. One late afternoon, clouds rolled in with sudden wind, stalls rattled, people hurried. The old woman's cart tilted. The young man happened by, already wet through. Without a word, he propped the legs, tied the canopy with spare rope, and spread his own jacket across the oranges. She tried to protest. He shook his head and said, out of habit, not sweet. They both laughed, and in that laugh lived everything they understood about each other. When the sky cleared, they shared the last unsweet orange on the cart. It was the best of the lot. The story traveled down the street the way good smells do. Customers began to buy an extra orange now and then and forget it on purpose. Some left a cup of tea when mornings were cold. The old woman sold oranges in a busy market. They say an orange a day keeps the sourness away. But for the old woman, each day was getting more and more sour. The people who bought her fruit no longer lingered. They didn't greet her or accept her compliments. Their eyes were hard and sharp, their smiles tight and brief. Then one day, a young man stopped by her stall. He peeled an orange and ate it slowly, savoring the juice that ran down his chin. He asked for two more, and when he peeled them, he shared the segments with his wife. He peeled a strip from one, tasted it and smiled. Not sweet, he said, placing it back on the cart. The old woman saw the love in his eyes and the easy affection of his touch. She tucked an extra fruit into the bag. A week later, the young man's wife walked to the stall on her own. She asked for 2 kilos and, copying her husband's little ritual, peeled a strip from one orange, tasted it and sighed. Not sweet, she said, placing it back on the cart with a wink so small it could have been a blink. The old woman's laughter came from the bottom of her chest. You two are trouble, she said, and tucked an extra fruit into the bag. One morning the old woman did not open her stall on time. The canvas hung loose. The cart was still. When she finally arrived, she moved slowly. The vegetable seller frowned. Are you unwell? Just a little tired, she said, setting down her basket. Work waited. She lifted her scale. The young man stepped from the crowd. I'll set up, he said. He fixed the legs, washed the fruit, and lined the oranges like shining buttons. He placed a small stool behind the cart. For when the street is quiet, he said. The old woman sat for a moment, surprised to find rest as sweet as fruit. A mother stopped with a child pulling at her sleeve. We can only buy 2 today, the mother whispered. Not sweet, the old woman replied cheerfully, slipping a third orange into the bag and tapping the child's nose with a fingertip. The mother blinked, then smiled with her eyes. Not a word was argued. By season's end, the cart had become a small island of softness on a busy street. People brought news as well as coins. A tailor offered to stitch a tear in the canopy. A student carried a box of oranges to the bus stop for an old man with shaking hands. Small mercies multiplied until they were no longer small. One evening, as the sun went down like a slow orange into the edge of the city, the old woman pressed a paper-wrapped bundle into the young man's hands. "For your home," she said. He opened it later at the kitchen table. Inside were 2 jars of marmalade, thick, bright, and neatly labeled in careful handwriting. On the label, "For the man who taught me to taste my own work," he dipped a spoon. It was sweet in a way that made him quiet for a moment. His wife leaned on his shoulder. "So?" she asked. He smiled. "Very sweet," he said at last. "The kind that stays."